In today's stories, we follow 5 hunters whose adventures ended in the worst way imaginable. From a twilight encounter where one wrong step proved fatal, to an elk hunt where letting your guard down turned deadly. But first, we start in Russia's frozen mountains, where following the wrong tracks led 2 friends into a predator's territory. It was October 14, 2016, in the remote Sikhote-Alin Mountains of Primorsky Krai, Russia, where ancient conifer forests stretched endlessly beneath gray autumn skies. The dense woodland, blanketed in fresh snow, had become a hunting ground where 2 worlds would collide with devastating consequences. Temperatures hovered near freezing as wind whistled through towering pines, creating an eerie symphony that masked the sounds of approaching danger. Gant Ridge, a 42-year-old American oil field contractor, had traveled thousands of miles for this licensed wild boar hunt. His weathered hands spoke of years working harsh environments across Alaska's North Slope, while his keen eyes reflected the experience of a seasoned North American hunter who had tracked everything from white-tailed deer to black bears. Beside him stood Victor Smith, a 39-year-old Canadian wildlife photographer whose passion for capturing nature's raw beauty had led him to pursue recreational hunting as a deeper connection to the wilderness he so loved to document. The Russian outfitter had issued stern warnings about recent tiger activity throughout the region. Livestock predation had increased over the past month, and fresh pug marks overlapped deer tracks throughout the snow-covered terrain. Local rangers reported defensive encounters near kill sites, and the ominous signs were everywhere for those who knew how to read them. Despite these warnings, the men pressed forward through the snow-laden forest, following what appeared to be wild boar trails near a known deer migration corridor. The promise of trophy boar had clouded their judgment about the apex predator that ruled these mountains. The Siberian tiger, the largest living cat subspecies and apex predator of the Russian Far East, represents one of nature's most formidable hunters. Adult males typically weigh between 400 and 600 pounds, with rare individuals documented above 650. Their estimated bite force ranges from roughly 950 to just over 1,000 psi, delivered through 4-inch canines designed to suffocate or sever vital vessels. Massive forelimbs allow them to grapple prey and break cervical vertebrae with sustained force rather than casual swipes. Their broad paws distribute weight efficiently across snow, enabling near-silent movement, while their striped coats dissolve into forest shadow. These territorial predators fiercely defend fresh kills, often caching prey beneath snow and debris before returning to feed for several days. The fatal mistake came when Ridge and Smith followed fresh tiger tracks directly to a partially covered red deer carcass hidden beneath pine boughs and snow. The metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the frigid air, and faint steam still rose from exposed tissue, clear indicators the kill was recent and the predator likely nearby. Instead of retreating immediately, they lingered within striking distance of the cache, examining the carcass with fatal curiosity. When movement rustled the dense brush approximately 20 meters away, Ridge raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the vegetation, a decision that triggered the tiger's defensive response. The forest's thick canopy reduced visibility to only a few meters as the massive predator exploded from cover with terrifying speed. The roughly 500-pound tiger covered the distance in seconds, its powerful hindquarters driving it forward in a blur of muscle and snow. Victor, standing closest to the carcass while photographing the scene, absorbed the initial charge. The impact hurled him backward onto the frozen ground with crushing force. Powerful jaws clamped around Victor's throat, the tiger's canines puncturing deep into soft tissue while compressing his airway and major vessels. The sustained bite caused catastrophic damage to the carotid artery and jugular vein. Blood pulsed heavily into the snow as oxygen flow to his brain collapsed. Victor lost consciousness within seconds, his body going limp shortly thereafter, as rapid blood loss and cerebral hypoxia took hold. Ridge's desperate shot grazed the tiger's shoulder, prompting a brief disengagement. As he moved toward his fallen friend, the wounded predator re-emerged with intensified aggression. A massive forelimb strike knocked Ridge off balance, the force sufficient to fracture bone and drive him into the snow. Before he could regain footing, the tiger seized his upper chest and neck area. Its canines penetrated deeply, severing major vessels near the shoulder and thoracic inlet. Massive hemorrhage followed, and Ridge's strength faded rapidly as blood loss became unsurvivable within moments. After neutralizing the perceived threats to its cached prey, the tiger withdrew into the forest, disappearing between the dark trunks as silently as it had appeared. Both men succumbed quickly to exsanguination in the Russian wilderness, their bodies discovered hours later when they failed to return to base camp. Russian authorities initiated an investigation, while wildlife officials assessed whether the tiger's behavior was defensive rather other than predatory. The international hunting community mourned the loss of two experienced outdoorsmen whose familiarity with wilderness risk had not been enough. Their families struggled to comprehend how a routine expedition for wild boar had ended with such devastating finality in one of the planet's most unforgiving ecosystems. Ridge and Smith's story remains a stark reminder of the immense power and territorial instinct of large apex predators. In remote wilderness, proximity to a fresh kill can transform curiosity into catastrophe in seconds. It was July 3, 2017, along the muddy banks of the Limpopo River Basin in South Africa, where the ancient waterway carved its path through the heart of the African bush. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the riverine landscape, while the air hung thick with humidity and the ever-present scent of water that drew both prey and predator to its life-giving shores. Cicadas droned in the trees, and distant bird calls echoed across the slow-moving current. This seemingly tranquil setting would soon become the stage for one of nature's most brutal encounters. Bram Vost, a 51-year-old German construction executive, had traveled from Munich to fulfill a lifelong dream of experiencing an authentic African safari. His successful engineering firm had afforded him the luxury of this licensed plains game expedition, and his methodical nature had led him to research every aspect of the hunt for months beforehand. He had studied terrain maps, animal behavior patterns, and seasonal migration routes, confident that preparation would minimize risk. The safari camp, strategically positioned near a bend in the river channel, offered prime access to the diverse wildlife that congregated along the water's edge during the dry season. Local rangers had documented aggressive encounters along this stretch of riverbank, warning visitors about the unpredictable temperament of the massive herbivores that emerged from the water at dusk to graze. The Limpopo's muddy banks bore the telltale slide marks and massive footprints that served as reminders of what lurked beneath the deceptively calm surface. Bram had been tracking a small herd of antelope through the riverine brush, following their well-worn paths that led directly to the water's edge, where they came to drink as daylight faded. The hippopotamus is widely regarded as one of Africa's deadliest large mammals, weighing up to 4,000 pounds, with jaws powerful enough to splinter small watercraft depending on construction and impact angle. These deceptively placid-looking giants possess a bite force often estimated around 1,800 psi. They can run at speeds approaching 30 miles per hour on land over short bursts, faster than most humans can sprint. Their massive canine and incisor teeth, which can exceed 20 inches in length, function as formidable weapons capable of crushing bone and tearing through tissue with devastating efficiency. Despite their bulky appearance, hippos are surprisingly agile and become intensely territorial when defending access to water, calves, or established grazing routes. Wildlife officials consistently classify them among Africa's most dangerous large mammals due to the frequency and severity of defensive attacks. The fatal mistake occurred as twilight descended, and Bram positioned himself between the river and a well-established hippo grazing path. The fading light reduced visibility significantly, and the tall elephant grass provided concealment for the massive animal that had emerged from the water to feed. Bram failed to detect the hippo concealed less than 20 meters away, its gray bulk blending into shadow and vegetation. His focus remained fixed on the antelope tracks, unaware that he had stepped directly into the path of a territorial bull returning inland. The hippo's emergence from the reeds was sudden and explosive. Without warning, the multi-ton animal launched into a full-speed charge, its massive bulk thundering across the ground with startling acceleration. The earth vibrated beneath its weight. Bram had only seconds to register the movement before the enraged animal closed the distance, its cavernous mouth opening wide to expose curved ivory tusks slick with river water. The initial impact knocked Bram violently to the ground, his rifle thrown from his grasp as the hippo's head struck with the force of a battering ram. Before he could attempt to roll away, the animal's jaws clamped down across his torso. The immense compressive force fractured multiple ribs instantly. The elongated lower canines penetrated deep into his chest, while the crushing pressure compressed his thoracic cavity, inflicting catastrophic internal trauma. The hippo then lifted him and hurled him aside before trampling forward in a defensive surge. Severe blunt force compression likely drove fractured rib segments inward, lacerating lung tissue and causing rapid internal hemorrhage. The combination of skeletal destruction, pulmonary injury, and massive blood loss would have led to rapid collapse within minutes, with hypovolemic shock developing swiftly. As abruptly as it had begun, the attack ended. The territorial animal retreated toward the river, disappearing into the reeds with heavy splashes that echoed across the water. The clearing fell silent again, broken only by the rustle of disturbed grass and the metallic scent of blood in the humid air. By the time guides reached the scene, there was nothing to be done. Bram died from extensive internal bleeding and traumatic chest injuries consistent with large animal compression and penetrating bite trauma. Authorities reviewed the incident as a wildlife-related fatality, reinforcing long-standing safety advisories about avoiding known hippo corridors during transitional feeding hours at dawn and dusk. His death served as a sobering reminder that in the African bush, danger does not always announce itself with a roar. Sometimes it rises silently from the reeds, defending territory with prehistoric force and absolute finality. For Kester Frey, the next lesson in wilderness brutality would unfold not along an African riverbank, but deep within the cold, unforgiving expanse of Alaska's coastal frontier. It was September 9, 2015, on the remote wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska, where towering Sitka spruces and dense alder thickets created an impenetrable maze across the rugged terrain. The island's pristine landscape, shrouded in morning mist rolling off the North Pacific, harbored some of North America's most formidable predators. The temperature hovered near freezing as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, threatening to unleash the early fury of an approaching coastal system. Kester Frey, a 33-year-old commercial fisherman from Kodiak's bustling harbor, had ventured into the backcountry for a solo deer hunting expedition during the island's brief open season. His weathered hands, scarred from years hauling nets and battling fierce Alaskan storms, gripped his rifle with the confidence of someone who had spent his entire adult life wresting sustenance from nature's harsh embrace. The solitary hunt represented a welcome respite from the dangerous waters that claimed fishermen's lives with ruthless regularity. Friends later said he respected the wilderness, but familiarity can sometimes dull urgency. The circling ravens had drawn Kester deeper into the wilderness, their aerial dance signaling the presence of carrion hidden somewhere in the dense undergrowth. On Kodiak Island, where brown bears frequently cache kills for extended feeding, such signs demanded caution. Wildlife officials had documented numerous aggressive encounters between hunters and bears defending food sources, particularly during fall hyperphagia, when bears intensify feeding before winter denning. Yet the promise of locating deer in this remote drainage proved too tempting to ignore. Kodiak brown bears are the largest brown bear subspecies in North America. While exceptional males have been recorded above 1,400 pounds, most mature males typically range between 800 and 1,200 pounds. Standing over 9 feet tall on their hind legs, they possess claws up to 6 inches long and a bite force capable of fracturing bone. Fiercely protective of food caches, they often cover carcasses with debris and return repeatedly over several days. Despite their mass, they can sprint at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour over short distances, accelerating with alarming efficiency across uneven tundra and forest floor. The fatal mistake occurred when Kester discovered a partially eaten deer carcass concealed beneath branches and moss in a small clearing. The ground around it showed disturbed soil and drag marks, classic signs of a cached kill. Instead of immediately retreating upon recognizing the evidence, he stepped closer, his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. The metallic scent of blood hung thick in the cold air. He scanned briefly, but not thoroughly. In predator country, hesitation can erase margins of safety. The bear emerged from dense alder at roughly 20 meters. Weighing approximately 800 pounds, well within the typical range for an adult male, it launched forward in a defensive charge. The ground vibrated under its weight as it closed the distance in seconds, brush exploding outward in its path. Kester had no time to shoulder his rifle or access deterrent spray. At that range, reaction time shrinks to fractions of a second. The first swipe knocked him violently to the forest floor. Claws tore through scalp and shoulder, inflicting deep lacerations that caused immediate blood loss and disorientation. As he attempted to roll, the bear clamped its jaws onto his neck and upper back. The bite crushed cervical vertebrae and caused catastrophic neck trauma. The force likely disrupted his spinal cord, while severe vascular injury led to rapid hemorrhage. Incapacitated almost instantly, Kester was unable to mount resistance as the bear delivered additional mauling bites intended to eliminate what it perceived as a threat. The assault was defensive in nature, swift, overwhelming, and focused on neutralization rather than prolonged predation. Within minutes, the attack was over. The bear eventually disengaged and covered the body with forest debris, consistent with documented caching behavior. Rain moved into the area later that afternoon, partially obscuring tracks and complicating recovery efforts. When Kester failed to return to harbor and missed a scheduled radio check-in, fellow fishermen alerted authorities. Search teams combed likely hunting areas using GPS data from his skiff's last known mooring point. His remains were located days later in a remote drainage basin. Authorities launched a formal investigation. Field analysis concluded the incident was a defensive response at a food cache rather than an unprovoked predatory event. Such distinctions influence wildlife management decisions, and no immediate evidence suggested abnormal bear behavior in the region. Kodiak's fishing community mourned the loss of an experienced outdoorsman who understood wilderness risk, yet encountered the narrow window where caution failed. His family faced the devastating reality that expertise cannot eliminate every variable in bear country. Frey's death underscored a sobering truth about Alaska's backcountry. Danger rarely announces itself. Sometimes it waits in silence, concealed behind alder shadows, until one irreversible step closes the distance. It was May 21, 2018, along the treacherous banks of the Zambezi River in a remote concession area of Zimbabwe, where the mighty waterway carved its ancient path through the heart of southern Africa. The late afternoon sun cast dancing reflections across the muddy current, while the air hung heavy with humidity and the constant buzz of insects that thrived in this aquatic ecosystem. Daxon Thorpe, a 46-year-old American entrepreneur from Colorado, had invested his considerable wealth in this once-in-a-lifetime licensed plains game safari. His successful tech company had afforded him the luxury of hunting Africa's most prestigious game, and his methodical business approach had led him to research every aspect of the expedition for months. The safari camp, positioned strategically along a bend in the Zambezi, offered access to some of Zimbabwe's most diverse wildlife populations that congregated along the life-giving waters during the dry season. Earlier that morning, safari guides had pointed out fresh crocodile slide marks along the muddy banks, explaining how these ancient predators used the same pathways for generations. The Zambezi River system harbors some of Africa's largest Nile crocodiles, and across sub-Saharan Africa, crocodile attacks collectively account for an estimated 1,000 human fatalities each year, with the Nile crocodile responsible for a significant share. Incidents are documented regularly along major river systems like the Zambezi, particularly in rural communities and fishing zones. Daxon had successfully harvested a magnificent impala near the water's edge, and the animal's final moments had carried it into the shallow reeds, where it lay partially submerged in the murky water. The Nile crocodile, Africa's largest freshwater predator, represents one of nature's most perfectly evolved killing machines. Large males can exceed 16 to 20 feet in length and weigh well over 1,000 pounds. Biomechanical testing of large specimens has recorded bite forces in the range of approximately 3,700 to 5,000 pounds per square inch, among the most powerful measured in any living animal. Their armored bodies, powered by massive tail muscles, can launch them from water with explosive speed, while their conical teeth are designed to grip and hold rather than chew. Crocodiles are ambush predators that can remain motionless for hours, their eyes and nostrils barely breaking the surface as they wait for prey to venture within striking distance. The fatal mistake occurred when Daxon approached the shoreline alone to retrieve his downed impala from the shallow water. His safari guide had momentarily returned to camp to gather additional equipment, leaving the American entrepreneur standing within striking range of the muddy bank. The murky water concealed the massive predator that had been drawn by the scent of blood and the vibrations of the struggling antelope. Daxon waded into knee-deep water, completely unaware that death lurked beneath the surface less than 10 feet away. The crocodile's attack came without warning as the massive reptile exploded from the depths with prehistoric fury. Its enormous jaws, lined with roughly 60 to 70 conical teeth, clamped down on Daxon's lower leg with bone-crushing force. The initial bite shattered his tibia and fibula while the interlocking teeth punctured deep into muscle and tendon, creating a vice-like grip that no human strength could overcome. The predator immediately initiated its signature death roll, using its powerful body to spin violently in the water while maintaining its crushing hold. The rotational force tore ligaments and soft tissue as Daxon's leg twisted beyond its natural limits, the sickening snap of bone echoing across the riverbank. Each revolution drove the crocodile's teeth deeper, while the torque destabilized his entire body. Rather than releasing him immediately, the crocodile dragged its victim into deeper water, propelling both predator and prey toward the river's center with sweeping strokes of its tail. Nile crocodiles commonly drown large prey before feeding, often wedging carcasses beneath submerged branches or debris to soften them. Daxon's desperate attempts to reach the surface were thwarted by the reptile's relentless grip and repeated submersions. The drowning process unfolded in brutal efficiency. Water filled his lungs as he was forced under again and again, each submersion longer than the last. Massive blood loss from his mangled leg compounded the hypoxia. Within minutes of the initial strike, the combination of traumatic injury and prolonged submersion proved fatal. The crocodile eventually secured the body beneath submerged debris near the riverbank. Hours later, shifting currents dislodged the remains, allowing them to surface downstream where recovery teams located them bearing the unmistakable puncture wounds and crushing rotational injuries characteristic of a large crocodilian attack. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, complicated by severe traumatic injuries to the lower extremity. Zimbabwean wildlife authorities launched an investigation into the incident, while safari operators reviewed safety protocols regarding carcass retrieval near crocodile-inhabited waters. The international hunting community mourned another tragic loss, while Daxon's family in Colorado struggled to comprehend how their safety-conscious patriarch had fallen victim to one of Africa's most efficient aquatic predators. Thorpe's death served as a chilling reminder that along Africa's great rivers, danger does not always announce itself. Beneath the ripples of the Zambezi, ancient instincts still rule, and hesitation, even for a moment, can prove fatal. It was October 28, 2017, in the remote backcountry of Montana, where endless expanses of snow-covered wilderness stretched beneath a steel-gray autumn sky. The temperature hovered just below freezing, and an early-season storm had dusted the high country in fresh snow that muffled sound beneath the timber. This was the narrow window when predators moved constantly, feeding with urgency before denning season. In that volatile stretch between fall and deep winter, the wilderness could turn deadly without warning. Lance Craig, a 29-year-old auto mechanic from Billings, had ventured deep into the mountains for a late October elk hunt. His calloused hands, stained with years of engine grease, gripped his rifle with the steady confidence of someone raised in these ranges. He understood the rhythms of Montana's seasons. Late October meant bulls were still active. Snow made tracking easier, and bears, still feeding heavily before hibernation, were unpredictable around carcasses. Wildlife officials had documented heightened grizzly activity that fall. Hyperphagia, the biological drive to consume massive calories before winter, made bears intensely food-focused and more willing to defend a carcass. Several recent reports detailed bears claiming hunter kills within minutes of a shot echoing through timber. The scent of blood drifting across cold air could travel astonishing distances, sometimes over ridgelines and into neighboring drainages, where other predators traveled established game trails. In dense timber, visibility can shrink to mere yards, leaving little time to react. The grizzly bear, among North America's most formidable predators, can exceed 800 pounds in mature males. With claws up to 4 inches long and a bite force estimated between roughly 975 and 1,150 psi, they are built for dominance at a carcass site. Despite their bulk, they can sprint at speeds approaching 35 miles per hour in short bursts. In late fall, when calories mean survival and denning sites are being selected in higher elevations, confrontation risk rises sharply, particularly at fresh kill locations. The fatal mistake occurred after Lance harvested a mature bull elk in a small clearing bordered by dense lodgepole pine. Focused on field dressing the animal, he set his rifle on the ground several feet away to work more freely. Steam from the opened body cavity rose into the cold air, carrying a powerful scent plume downslope through the timber. Ravens had already begun circling overhead, their calls echoing sharply, often one of the first indicators that larger scavengers are nearby. The metallic odor of blood hung heavy in the still air. The bear approached from downwind. It emerged at roughly 25 meters, head low, ears forward, claiming behavior unmistakable. This was not a curious pass-through. It was a food defense charge triggered by proximity to a high-calorie resource. Lance turned at the last second, instinctively reaching for the rifle that was now out of reach, but the distance vanished in seconds across the snow-dusted ground. The impact drove him backward into the blood-streaked snow as the bear's forelimbs struck with crushing force. Claws tore through heavy canvas and insulated layers, opening deep lacerations across his back and shoulders. Before he could regain footing, the bear seized him at the neck and upper shoulder. Its canines penetrated deeply, damaging major vessels in his neck and inflicting catastrophic trauma to the cervical spine. The force of the bite compromised his airway while severe blood loss began almost immediately. He remained conscious only briefly as the bear maintained pressure to neutralize what it perceived as competition over the carcass. The mauling continued for several moments, measured not in cinematic instant death, but in devastating rapid trauma. Crushing bites fractured ribs and caused massive internal bleeding. The combination of spinal injury, vascular damage, and exsanguination proved fatal within minutes in the freezing alpine clearing. far from immediate medical aid. After disengaging, the grizzly shifted attention back to the elk, intermittently dragging debris and snow over Lance's body in behavior consistent with food caching near a claimed resource. Such partial covering is commonly observed when bears intend to return to feed, conserving calories by protecting the site from other scavengers. The clearing showed signs of prolonged feeding activity before the animal finally moved off. When Lance failed to return, search teams located him days later near the partially consumed elk. Investigators documented classic late-season carcass defense behavior during peak pre-denning activity, emphasizing that most fatal encounters in the region occur at close range and involve surprise at kill sites rather than prolonged predatory pursuit. Craig's death underscored a harsh, seasonal truth. Late October in grizzly country carries elevated risk, particularly when hunters are alone and focused on processing game. Even experienced outdoorsmen can be overwhelmed in seconds when scent, calories, and territorial instinct converge in the narrow window before winter dormancy. In Montana's high country, predator and prey remain bound by ancient rules. And in those final weeks before snow seals the mountains, survival belongs to the animal most prepared and most willing to defend its claim. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.